Welcome back to Discourse number 2. You create your reality, the manifestation of thought. This is session number 15. The holographic universe. Earlier in this discourse, a quote was provided from the book The Disappearance of the Universe by Gary Renard that quoted one of the ascended masters that he conversed with. It stated, "Purser, don't forget the images you see in what you think is your real life are no more real than the images you see on TV or at the movies." This comment by Purser, that real life is no more real than the images you see on a TV or at the movies, is behind the concept of creative ideation that has frequently been mentioned both in this discourse and the Discourse for Ego Personality. The term hologram can now be introduced as it becomes the basis for how the virtual reality of your personal story is projected for you to sensory experience your mental tapestry, program, or attitude, an outward projection of an inward condition. What you believe to be true will be projected onto the screen of reality for you to experience. Spiritual master and guru Paramahansa Yogananda also uses the analogy of a movie or motion picture to express life as illusionary. The lifelong images of the motion picture illustrate many truths concerning creation. The cosmic director has written his own plays and assembled the tremendous cast for the pageant of the centuries. From the dark booth of eternity, he pours his creative beam through the films of successive ages, and the pictures are thrown on the screen of space. Just as the motion picture images appear to be real, but are only a combinations of light and shade, so is the universal variety a delusive seeming. The planetary spheres with their countless forms of life are naught but figures in a cosmic motion picture, temporarily true to five sense perceptions as the scenes are cast on the screen of man's consciousness by the infinite creative beam. A cinema audience can look up and see that all screen images are appearing through the instrumentality of one imageless beam of light. The colourful universal drama is similarly issuing from the single white light of a cosmic source. With inconceivable ingenuity, God is staging an entertainment for his human children, making them actors as well as audience in his planetary theatre. Before proceeding further, it is appropriate to again acknowledge this understanding that life as your experience is illusionary, maya, a simulation or holographic in nature, is not intended to diminish or negate your experiences of suffering. Your experience is very real and requires acknowledgement, not denial. The fact that dreams can also be nightmares is a testament to this truth. This quote from Yogananda is now continued here in respect to the experience of suffering. One day I entered a motion picture house to view a newsreel of the European battlefields. World War I was still being waged in the West. The newsreel recorded the carnage with such realism that I left the theatre with a troubled heart. Lord, I prayed, why dost thou permit such suffering? To my intense surprise, an instant answer came in the form of a vision of the actual European battlefields. The horror of the struggle, filled with the dead and dying, far surpassed in ferocity any representation of the newsreel. Look intently, a gentle voice spoke to my inner consciousness. You will see that these scenes now being enacted in France are nothing but a play of chiaroscuro. They are the cosmic motion picture, as real and as unreal as the theatre newsreel you have just seen a play within a play. My heart was still not comforted. The divine voice went on. Creation is light and shadow both, else no picture is possible. The good and evil of Maya must ever alternate in supremacy. If joy was ceaseless here in this world, would man ever seek another? Without suffering, he scarcely cares to recall that he has forsaken his eternal home. Pain is a prod to remembrance. The way of escape is through wisdom. The tragedy of death is unreal. Those who shudder at it are like an ignorant actor who dies of fright on the stage when nothing more is fired at him than a blank cartridge. My sons are the children of light. They will not sleep forever in delusion. The word hologram arises from two words, holos, which is the Greek word for whole, and gram, meaning that which is drawn, a picture, a drawing, that which is written, piece of writing. It was the work of Denis Gabor, a Hungarian-born scientist and electrical engineer whose work on improving the resolution of the electron microscope led to his discovery of holography and the hologram in 1947. However, it was not until the invention of the laser light in the 1960s that an actual hologram could be physically produced based on Gabor's mathematical equations. The most significant feature of the hologram, as implied within its reference to whole, is its ability to store information as an image in its entirety within the interference pattern of a 2D surface that is a feature of the wave function of electrons, as discussed earlier. An interference pattern is information that is spread out or scattered rather than localized or focused in one place. Imagine having a camera that tunes the lens until the image is focused and then a photograph is taken. Now tune the lens until the image is blurred or defocused. This spread or scatter of information is still present and well regulated, but the image is not visible. This blur is essentially a hologram. All that is needed is to refocus the lens and the image will appear as a three-dimensional object. A hologram is essentially a mechanism that can store an enormous amount of information as an interference pattern. Another essential feature of the hologram is its ability to reproduce the entirety of this information or image within any part of the hologram. Slice it up into the smallest fragment or part and the entirety of the information and image is still present. Each part contains the whole and each whole contains the part. To understand primal reality, this concept of holograms is essential. Primal reality as consciousness is the interference pattern held within the pure mind of all that is. It is the grand database of the Akasha, where all information is held as memory. This is the implicate, enfolded, order that David Bowen refers to as the frequency domain of quantum physics. It is the blurred image prior to focus. Your personal reality experience as an individuated ego-body-mind consciousness is the finite mind that focuses the lens of attention or awareness on the interference pattern and creates 3D images that are experienced as real. The concept of projection referred to in this discourse and the previous discourse ego-personality can now be enhanced by redefining it as a holographic projection. In the earlier discourse, the ego-personality, it was stated, previously in this discourse, the ego archetype was described as a pattern of filters and biases that determine fixations of focus and attention. Its effect is to take your unlimited awareness and limit it to a very narrow bandwidth of attention, hence enabling a very particular point of view to be experienced. The ego takes on a telescopic, limited perspective of life that is then viewed through a narrow lens known as my life. Wholeness is then perceived as divided and separate. The ego-body-mind consciousness is the archetype that focuses the lens of perception to extract images to be holographically projected and experienced as personal reality. In the Eastern philosophical teachings of Buddhism and Hinduism, there is a parable known as the blind men and the elephant, which seeks to express this idea that the limited, finite mind of the individuated ego is unable to experience the wholeness underlying primal reality whilst imprisoned by its senses. Once upon a time there was a certain Raja who called to his servant and said, "Come, good fellow, go and gather together in one place all the men of the Savathi who were born blind, and show them an elephant." "Very good, sire," replied the servant, and he did as he was told. He said to the blind man assembled there, "Here is an elephant," and to one man he presented the head of the elephant, to another its ears, to another a tusk, to another the trunk, the foot, back, tail, and tuft of the tail, saying to each one of them that that was the elephant. When the blind men had felt the elephant, the Raja went to each of them and said to each, "Well, blind man, have you seen the elephant? Tell me, what sort of thing is an elephant?" Thereupon the men who were presented with the head answered, "Sire, an elephant is like a pot." And the men who had observed the ear replied, "An elephant is like a winnowing basket." Those who had been presented with a tusk said it was a ploughshare. Those who knew only the trunk said it was a plough. Others said the body was a granary, the foot a pillar, the back a mortar, the tail a pestle, the tuft of the tail a brush. Then they began to quarrel, shouting, "Yes, it is. No, it is not. An elephant is not that. Yes, it's like that," and so on until they came to blows over the matter. Essentially, the human entity is not only a vibrational expression of the hologram, but also a vibrational translator of frequencies as well. The archetype will set the limitations of what frequency is able to be detected and manifested from the whole interference pattern containing all information in the frequency-specific domain. This idea can be expressed by the following image. A significant feature of the holographic nature of the universe is self-similarity and scalability. The interference pattern allows for a continuous feedback loop of information to be held in every part of the hologram at whatever scale it is projecting. Nothing is separate but always in constant communication. Hence an atom, the DNA, and a cell, for example, is holographic in nature, as equally as the galaxies, planets, and stars in the entire universe. As above, so below, as Hermes declared. Resonance is a key feature of the holographic nature of primal reality. A human entity that is expressed as a frequency-specific experience within the hologram can only interpret the interference pattern that it is in resonance with, such as the three blind men defining the elephant. Hence the difficulty of Western science researchers to investigate the nature of reality from the perspective of only the part, not the whole, becomes self-evident. The holographic nature of reality is becoming a defining direction for scientific investigation in the 20th century and propelled the work of quantum physicist David Bohm. His theory of the implicit order arises from the foundation that information is enfolded within the non-local field or frequency domain of consciousness, which is formless. The appearance as form or objects into the visible realm of time and space was called the explicit order, or the unfolded nature of information. It was Bohm's introduction to Gabor's mathematics of the hologram and the interference patterns it contained that directed his theories and research. In his book Wholeness and the Implicate Order, published in 1980, he writes, "Is there an instrument that can help give a certain immediate perceptual insight into what can be meant by undivided wholeness, as the lens did for what can be meant by analysis of a system into parts? It is suggested here that one can obtain such insight by considering hologram. In the 1960s, Bohm had established a friendship with Eastern philosophical teacher Jiddu Krishnamurti, which allowed the introduction of consciousness and wholeness to be incorporated into his research and move beyond the limited perspectives of Western scientific paradigms of the day. This incorporation of the wholeness perspective led to his theory of the implicate order and holonomy being the law of the whole. He further writes, so in terms of this notion, the idea of a separately and independently existent particle is seen to be, at best, an abstraction furnishing a valid approximation only in a certain limited domain. Ultimately, the entire universe, with all its particles, including those constituting human beings, their laboratories, observing instruments, etc., has to be understood as a single, undivided whole, in which analysis into separately and independently existent parts has no fundamental status. Whilst Bohm, as a quantum physicist, was expanding on his theory on the holographic nature of reality, another brilliant mind, that of neuroscientist and neurosurgeon Karl Pribram, was also exploring Gabor's holographic mathematics in his brain systems research. As a 21-year-old university medical student graduate, Pribram had worked with Carl Lashley, a psychologist and behaviorist researcher at Yerkes Primate Center in Florida. Lashley was involved in research on physical memory storage within the brain. Despite years of research and experiments with rats and primates to localize memory traces or engrams within the brain structures and mechanisms, he was unable to find any such localization. It was Lashley's inability to locate engrams that Rupert Sheldrake's earlier comment referred to in his book Science Set Free was based upon. Attempts to locate memory traces in the brain have been unsuccessful despite more than a century of research costing many billions of dollars. Sheldrake's theory of morphogenetic fields arose as an alternative explanation to the storage and location of memories that were not localized in the physical brain as Lashley was expecting. Just as Sheldrake turned to alternative explanations to explain memory engrams, so too did Lashley's work influence Pribram to also research other possible mechanisms to explain memory retrieval and storage. It was in 1965 that Pribram read an article in Scientific American called Photography by Laser, which described the nature of holographic interference patterns that the breakthrough came. In Pribram's book, The Form Within My Point of View, published in 2013, he writes, Gabor's mathematical holographic procedure, which Leaf had later used to produce a holographic process, was a miraculous answer to the very question Jack Hilgard had posed to me about perception just a few weeks earlier. Everything in a pattern that we perceive, shading, detail, and texture, could be accomplished with ease through the holographic process. Pribram would receive a profound affirmation that he was indeed on the right path with his research in 1971, when Gabor received a Nobel Prize in Physics for his work on holography. During Gabor's acceptance speech, he commented, "In a hologram, the information is spread over the entire hologram area. The appearance of such a diffused hologram is extraordinary. It looks like noise. A diffused hologram is therefore a distributed memory, and this has evoked much speculation whether human memory is not perhaps, as it were, holographic, because it is well known that a good part of the brain can be destroyed without wiping out every trace of memory." It was in 1975, following a conversation with his son, John Pribram, a physicist, who provided the name of David Bohm to his father. In a synchronistic convergence of great minds, Pribram, in the same week, was invited to meet with David Bohm and his friend Krishnamurti. In Pribram's paper, The Implicate Brain, he recalls, "I was exuberant. Bohm held the answers which I had been seeking. I had for years maintained that part of the puzzle of brain functioning, especially the distributed aspects of memory storage and the transformation into the spatial frequency domain, resembled the process by which holograms are constructed. My hunch that perhaps the physical input to the senses shared this transformed domain seemed to be sufficiently realistic to be shared by one of the major contributors to theoretical physics. Pribram did meet with David Bohm and continued to do so over the course of their lives. Together they combined their research to progress a new theory known as holonomic brain theory. This theory embraced the concept that the brain-mind functions in time and space were oscillations and coupled with the quantum field of the frequency domain beyond time and space. In Wholeness and the Implicate Order, Bohm unites his own theories of the wholeness contained within the frequency domain of the quantum field with Pribram's research into the brain and memory. He writes, Pribram has given evidence backing up his suggestion that memories are generally recorded all over the brain in such a way that information concerning a given object or quality is not stored in a particular cell or localized part of the brain, but rather that all the information is enfolded over the whole. This storage resembles a hologram in its function, but its actual structure is much more complex. We can then suggest that when the holographic record in the brain is suitably activated, the response is to create a pattern of nervous energy constituting a partial experience similar to that which produced the hologram in the first place. But it is also different in that it is less detailed, in that memories from many different times may merge together, and in that memories may be connected by association and by logical thought to give a certain further order to the whole pattern. In addition, if sensory data is also being attended to at the same time, the whole of this response from memory will, in general, fuse with the nervous excitation coming from the senses to give rise to an overall experience in which memory, logic, and sensory activity combine into a single unanalyzable whole. One of the most significant features of the hologram is the use of a holographic optical element such as a lens, filter, beam splitter, or diffraction grating to produce the holographic image. It is this lens or filter that pierces the interference pattern to project the image contained within it three-dimensionally. Without the lens to focus an image, everything remains a blur. Pribram refers to this significant factor in The Form Within My Point of View. In the early 1980s, the quantum physicist David Bohm pointed out that if humankind did not have telescopes with lenses, the universe would appear to us as a holographic blur, an emptiness of all forms such as objects. Pribram not only researched memory and brain functioning, but also the process of perception, including the optical features of the eye creating vision. If the universe required a telescope as a lens to perceive its parts, a microscopic lens to view an individual molecule, then the eye was perhaps the lens that made a physical objective reality of things to be perceived from the blur of wholeness. His theory that the eye was also a holographic feature is referred to in his book, The Form Within My Point of View. Minute oscillations of the relation between receptor and stimulus are necessary for any perceptual experience to occur. These oscillations describe paths around stable points called point attractors. Point attractors are the result of transformations from the oscillations that describe the sensory input into the spectral domain to space-time pixels from which images are composed. When points become grouped by moving together with respect to other points, the group is perceived as a form, that is, an object. A significant point of reference contained within this statement is that of oscillations. Pribram describes the transformation from the spectral domain, which is Bohm's implicate order of the non-local quantum field, into space-time pixels, which is the three-dimensional experience of your personal reality. Hence, transference from wholeness to a focused image is dependent on oscillations, which are frequency. Remember that the archetype, as stated previously, is the setting of the ego-body-mind consciousness that creates the human entity to be frequency specific. You can only perceive in your personal reality experience what you are resonant or attuned vibrationally to receive in the visible light spectrum. Just as the observer or wheeler's participator acts as the pure mind's eye of consciousness collapsing the wave into a particle, bit or pixel, the ego-body-mind consciousness uses the human entity's eyes as the lens or filter to holographically project images as a personal reality experience, an outward projection of an inward condition. There is no objective solid reality that is outside and your eyes are seeing on the visual cortex of the brain. It is the mind that is seeing and creating the 3D holographic projection that you experience as your personal reality. Not only does Pribram and Bohm in their holonomic brain theory confirm this, but also the research of John Eccles, Benjamin Livett, John Wheeler, and Rupert Sheldrake, all mentioned earlier. Truth does not contradict itself, but only affirms. To confirm this, Karl Pribram states, "We may experience the world we navigate as being out there, but the apparatus that makes our experience possible is within our skin. My eyes and brain enable me to see, but the location of what I see is projected out, away from, and beyond those bodily structures that make my seeing possible." The Eastern spiritual teachers who hold the knowledge of the whole and understand the entirety of the elephant, as in the parable, have continually taught this truth as part of nirvana and enlightenment. As Yogananda declared earlier, just as the motion picture images appear to be real, but are only combinations of light and shade, so is the universal variety of delusive seeming. Another renowned spiritual teacher, Samuel Orne Were, was a highly recognized teacher of Gnosticism and authored over 60 books on spirituality in his lifetime. In his book, Treatise in Revolutionary Psychology, he writes, "All things, all circumstances that occur outside ourselves on the stage of this world are exclusively the reflection of what we carry within. With good reason, then, we can solemnly declare that the exterior is the reflection of the interior. When someone changes internally, and if that change is radical, then circumstances, life, and the external also change." In the earlier discourse, The Ego Personality, a quote from A Course in Miracles was used to confirm this assertion that the world of objective things is a projection of an internal condition. Projection makes perception. The world you see is what you gave it, nothing more than that. But though it is no more than that, it is not less. Therefore to you it is important. It is the witness to your state of mind, the outside picture of an inward condition. As a man thinketh, so does he perceive. Therefore seek not to change the world, but choose to change your mind about the world. Perception is a result and not a cause. Finally, in full circle, we return to the father of quantum physics, Max Planck, whose theories assisted in bridging the ideas of Eastern spiritual concepts of oneness and consciousness with those of Western scientific paradigms. In his final days, he confirmed his ultimate understanding that solid matter does not exist, but there is only a conscious and intelligent mind that is the foundation of reality, exactly as the Eastern philosophies have always proclaimed. In 1944, just 3 years prior to his death, at the age of 89, he stated, "As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much. There is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by the virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Believing is seeing. In the earlier Discourse for Ego Personality, the etymological definition of belief was provided as meaning conviction of the truth of a proposition or alleged fact without knowledge. It was also stated that only the ego, body, mind consciousness has beliefs because it does not know. Christ's consciousness as omniscience is beyond belief, the state of all knowledge or knowingness. Another statement also appeared following this definition that it is relevant to be mentioned again. Perceptions are dependent on beliefs as they narrow the ego's focus of attention, which now only gives awareness to events and circumstances that support its belief. Everything else is filtered out and rejected. Belief produces the acceptance of existence. You will believe what you perceive as true, despite the unawareness that the belief was made prior to the experience. There is a fundamental premise that the human entity depends upon when navigating its personal reality from the perspective of sensory data alone. It states that seeing is believing. However, the truth is the exact opposite as expressed by all of the information provided to this point, especially in the context of the hologram. Instead, believing is seeing, is the correct interpretation that personal reality can be clearly understood. The hologram creates a matrix of reality where you will experience the limited ego, body, mind, consciousness thought stream of the belief, I am separate. Beliefs provide the rule set of the archetypical pattern as they are dependent on values and meaning that creates judgments. Hence, your beliefs provide the lens of focus that collapses the quantum field of probabilities and potentials into existence within the matrix of time and space. In this way, the wholeness of all that is experiences a specific point of view or a perspective of life. You as a human entity reside in a matrix created electromagnetically to manifest vibrationally your predominant thoughts. Your personal reality is created by frequency. What appears on your screen of the hologram will be whatever you are resonating with as a state of being. Returning again to The Secret Doctrine by Madame Blavatsky, this power to manifest thought is one of the 7 primary powers in nature, being the 4th. She writes, 4. Kriya Sakati, the mysterious power of thought which enables it to produce external, perceptible, phenomenal results by its own inherent energy. The ancients held that any idea will manifest itself externally if one's attention is deeply concentrated upon it. Similarly, an intense volition will be followed by the desired result. Belief becomes the focus that acts as the laser beam in the hologram, enabling a picture or image to be projected from the interference pattern. Hence, a change in beliefs in your subconscious program will have a significant effect on your projections in the holographic matrix experienced as your personal reality. A change of mind will create a change in perspective. All suffering is experienced by the split mind that perceives in error. Healing must therefore be at the level of the mind. This is why A Course in Miracles is a course in mind training, as are the practices of mindfulness of the Buddhist philosophies and the Yoga Sutras of the Hindus. This image reflects the idea that the ego-body-mind consciousness is a dualistic perspective of consciousness that projects holographically an illusion of separate individuals that are experienced as real, but do not have any solid actuality in primal reality. A Course in Miracles calls this correction of the perceptual error of the human entity at-one-ment. A miracle is a correction introduced into false thinking by me. It acts as a catalyst, breaking up erroneous perception and reorganizing it properly. This places you under the at-one-ment principle, where perception is healed. Until this has occurred, knowledge of the divine order is impossible. In the Buddhist and Hindu philosophies, this return to your remembrance as your true self, as a spiritual essence with correct perception to see God in all, is called God actualized and experienced as nirvana or enlightenment. This was symbolized by the chakra pertaining to the third eye and a marking or red dot on the forehead. To see or perceive with the one eye, or the all-seeing eye, is to rise to a higher state of consciousness and perceive with the mind of God, or all that is. As poet and writer William Blake once wrote, "If the doors of perception were cleansed, and everything would appear to man as it is, infinite, for man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chunks of his cavern." It is the process of at-one-ment, salvation or enlightenment that heals the split mind of the ego, body, mind consciousness to again perceive the oneness that pervades all. However, for this new perspective to be experienced, the human entity's psychological filters and biases must be chemically purified. A Course in Miracles, whose teachings provide the healing required to receive the miracle of the Christ consciousness thought, affirms this. Miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. This process of purification was called by the ancient mystery schools the Great Work. It is this chemical transformation that underlies the spiritual journey of return, and hence is the basis for the human entity's experience of the dark night of the soul. Great suffering is a symptom of this process. Hence it becomes crucial to your understanding of spiritual awakening that this process of purification is explained. The next discourse will now provide a detailed explanation of the purification required on the journey of ascension or enlightenment. This concludes session number 15 of discourse number 2. You create your reality, the manifestation of thought. We're now going to proceed to discourse number 3, entitled The Great Work Magnus Opus, The Journey of Return. This one will be part 1, as it is divided into 2 parts. I will put a link in the description box below for session number 16, which will be the start of discourse number 3, part 1. Thank you so much for your attendance at this session and for this discourse, and I look forward to seeing you at the start of the third discourse. So be it.